meeting with Admire Nyamwanza to talk about rural farming communities in Zimbabwe. Admire is a researcher at the Human Sciences Research Council in South Africa, and he's been working on rural development and economic issues for a number of years. Admire, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you.
So could you describe what the main livelihood sources are for the communities you've been working with? And maybe just explain whereabouts in Zimbabwe these communities are situated.
Okay, so these communities are in northern Zimbabwe, in National and Central Province, in a district called Mbire. So it's at the border with Mozambique and Zambia.
Okay.
So it's the Zimbabwean border community there. Livelihoods, they practice agricultural activities and non-agricultural activities, but mostly agricultural activities. And they do crop production and livestock production. For crop production, they practice upland crop production, so that's farming in dryland fields using the normal rains. Then they also do riverbank farming, so there's the riverbank farming system as well. Then livestock, they keep cattle, goats, sheep, and poultry. And they also do some commercial fishing. Yeah, so they fish and sell to other villagers and in other provinces and across the border in Mozambique and Zambia. Yes.
And do they have cash crops that they make money out of, or is it all subsistence farming?
They do cash cropping. They do cotton agriculture.
Okay.
Yeah. So cotton is the main cash crop there. Then they also have sorghum. So those are the crops for the upland farms. Then for the riverbanks, that's where you find maize. Then also your green vegetables, tomatoes and onions. Yeah. Yes.
And the cotton crops, who do they supply to? So what sort of, if you like, commodity system do they feed into?
So the system is like they have contractors who are there. So the arrangement is contract farming. So there are a lot of companies which provide them with inputs such as fertilizer, seed, chemicals, and these companies also have their own extension officers who provide them with advice on how to do cotton farming well. And yeah.
And those inputs that they get, like fertilizers, do they have to pay for those, or do they get given them and then that gets taken off the price of the cotton that when they sell it back to the company?
So they are given at the beginning of the farming season. So at harvesting time, they are expected to sell to the specific companies that would have provided them with the various inputs, and they are given. So the money for the inputs is deducted from the produce.
Yeah.
And they are given the balance.
Okay. Yeah. And so I'm quite interested to find out what the climatic stresses are that these farmers operate under. I'm guessing that in the lowland areas where in the river floodplain, water stress is not such a problem. But on the dryland farming, what are the main ways that climate is affecting their productivity?
Yeah. So the main climatic problems there are rainfall. So rainfall is erratic and inconsistent, and there is also intra-seasonal dry spells. So they may receive normal rainfalls within a season, but these dry spells coming when crop is at such a critical stage of growth really affects the quality and quantity of the yield, and also increasing drought cycles. The drought cycles are increasing in that part of the country. Then also there's also flooding. Now, flooding mainly affects the riverbank crops, because even when it rains too much upstream, the crops are flooded.
Yeah.
Then there's also high temperatures also affecting their crops. So I can say these are the main climatic challenges.
If you have heat stress, then your crop will be reduced.
Yes,
yeah, okay.
yes. Or if you get the crop, the quality will be affected.
And then going on to the question of increasing drought cycles, are the farmers reporting that their yields and the quality's been decreasing progressively, or?
Yes. Actually, comparing from the 90s, I did a historical timeline with them at one point, and they were raising issues that because of these increases in drought cycles, they are seeing that their crops are really being affected over the years. Yeah.
And sorghum is a drought resistant.
It's a drought resistant crop.
Yeah.
So that's one of the coping mechanisms that they've adopted. So that shift from maize to sorghum, that's one. Then they are also intensifying the riverbank, riverbank agriculture, because there is more water there than in the drylands. Then also they are diversifying into other livelihood activities. I've talked of the commercial fishing they do. So that's another way of coping as well. Then the last way, they said when the West come to the West, they have temporarily migrated into Mozambique and Zambia to look for jobs and food.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does that have long-term impacts on the farm itself, in the sense of if the farm's abandoned for periods, does that then affect the productivity when they come back, or can they recover quite quickly?
I think they, from my conversations with them, they don't really abandon for long.
Okay.
It's just for when the crops have failed, for example, then they leave and move to the across the border, but they are back quite quickly. Yeah.
And do they use climate information at all? So in planning their farming?
Yes, they do. There are quite a number of sources of climate information. So there is the local Met Office, which provides them with weather information. There is also the media. Some of them listen to the radio and so forth. The local cotton company extension officers that I was talking of also provides them with some climate information. And they also use their own local knowledge, indigenous knowledge. Yeah. And for indigenous knowledge, it's quite for them, it's quite trustworthy than these other.
So if they had conflicting information from a weather forecast and from their own sort of traditional knowledge systems, would they go with the traditional knowledge system?
They will go with the traditional system, because they say from history, they've had problems with the scientific weather information, which has been incorrect, and they've been misled quite a number of times. Yeah.
And do you see, if you had to look 10 or 15 years in the future, how do you think the current sort of farming systems would still be sustainable if the current climatic trends continued, or would they reach some tipping point where things might have to change quite radically?
I think they are still good to go, because if I look at the period, for example, that I placed my PhD study in, I was looking at 1990 to 2010, and there have not been much changes in their farming. Okay, there have been changes, but I don't see any tipping point in as far as them changing their farming system, as it were, or their farming systems failing. Yeah. Because they have managed to change, for example, from maize to sorghum. And I think the riverbank has really provided them with a fallback system, so as it were.
So a lot of people say that one of the best ways we can adapt agriculture in Africa, especially small farm agriculture, is to overcome or increase current yields, because there's often a big yield gap between what's potentially available given the environmental conditions and what the sort of average small farmer can produce. Do you think that's the case in your case study area as well, that there's scope for improving the farming methods, improving inputs, and increasing the yields? Or
yes, absolutely. I think irrigation would be helpful in that case. If the government would invest in irrigation, helping these farmers, I think it would be useful to them, because irrigation would absolutely allow for crop intensification that rain-fed agriculture, with rain-fed agriculture, will not be possible. So irrigation would be one, and they've had irrigation before in that area, but with the economy struggling in Zimbabwe over the 2 decades or so, the past 2 decades or so, I mean, the infrastructure has collapsed. Yeah, so if that could be revived, that could help them quite a lot. And also, if they could improve climate services in that part of the country, it would also help, because as we have been discussing just now, that they mainly rely on local knowledge. But then scientific knowledge, if it were to complement, if they were to get relevant, accurate, and timely scientific information, that would also help them in their farming practices. Then I think the government also needs to help with augmenting the practices of the activities of the cotton companies. So also expanding the input base of these farmers and supporting what is being done by cotton companies at the moment.
Because presumably the cotton companies only provide information around cotton production, or do they help with other aspects of farming as well?
No, they also help with inputs. But there are problems with these private cotton companies. Farmers were complaining of inflated prices, for example, and them not getting profit out of the final product. So there have been these problems. So my thinking would be, if government comes in with some input schemes to augment the efforts of these private companies, it would help.
And just a final question is, how do you think these farmers see their future? Do they see their future as being remaining as farmers, or do they see a desired future as, I don't know, migrating into urban areas? I mean, how important is the identity and their own aspirations in terms of the future of farming in this area, do you think?
I think they really like farming. There is this perception that cotton has money. With cotton you can have a lot of money if you are ably supported, to them especially by the government. So even the young men and women who are there, they also aspire to have their own piece of land and have input support and do a lot of cotton farming, because they have seen there are quite examples of people who have made it through cotton in that part of the country. So most of them, their aspirations revolve around that cotton farming.
So they see the potential for having, being economically productive in a farming setting because of the cash crops that provide a monetary income over and above the subsistence.
Yes, even with sorghum, it has been doing quite well during the period that I was doing my research there. The only thing they've been complaining about are markets. Where do we sell our produce profitably?
Yeah.
You see, but they really attach a lot of value to that, to their farming systems.
So one of the best things that the private sector and government could be doing is creating the market opportunities for the farmers so that they actually can make money and invest in their own future, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, Admire, thanks very much for those answers to these questions. I think what we've seen is that there are examples where actually smallholder farming that's diversified can actually be quite resilient to climate change, and with the right support systems in place that can actually enhance the resilience. So it's not the message I'm getting is that smallholder farming is not doomed for failure under climate change. It's just it's got to be able to. It has lots of characteristics that make it viable, and it just needs the right support system.
Yeah, it just needs the right support systems in place. Yeah, but just to add, for a country like Zimbabwe, which has been fluctuating in as far as macroeconomic issues are concerned, it's also very tricky to assure farmers that they are going to get the right support immediatly. You see, because of those macroeconomic and uncertainty in governance. So whilst we are looking at them having support in a setting like Zimbabwe's, it might not be assured for the coming.
Yeah, so elsewhere in the course we talk about there being a big development deficit in many African contexts, and that's really what you're talking about, is that the quality of the developmental state means that it's really, really hard for individual farmers to survive because of all the instability and uncertainty and lack of strong financial institutions, etc.
Yes.
So thanks, Admire, for coming and talking to us and giving us some insights into the sort of complexities and potential for rural farmers in a southern African country like Zimbabwe.
Thank you very much.